Good day, everyone. Welcome to the first lecture of the course Engineering Science 144 for the Engineering Management. This is a review lecture of modules 1 and 2, where under module 1, it talks about the introduction to engineering management. And under this module are lessons 1.1, which talks about functions of the engineer, and lesson 1.2, which tackles about engineering management. Next up is module 2, which talks about decision making. Engineers are technical people. So in a company or an organization, engineers are expected to perform a variety of tasks depending on their specialization or job level. So it is important to the engineer that he knows what is expected of him so that he may be able to perform his job effectively and efficiently. However, as engineers are trained to be technical and they are not trained directly to deal with people, it is expected that one of their weaknesses will most often be on people-based skills. This difficulty will be more apparent once they are assigned to occupy management positions, and it follows that the engineer will want, and if the engineer would want to do his job well, there's a need for the engineer to be exposed or be trained for engineering management. All right. So before we'll talk about engineering management, let's talk about the functions of the engineer. So since the recorded history of mankind, uh, humans have benefited from the various tools, equipment, and projects developed by engineers. So among these are such as, for example, during the 6000 to 3000 BC, engineers or people have invented a stone blade axe and the irrigation system for crop growing. So this is under in the agricultural revolution. Second is the building of pyramids of Egypt. So this is around 3000 to 600 BC. So as people started to build mega structures or large structures that employs several disciplines. Yeah. And also the same with pyramids of Egypt is the building of roads or viaduct or aqueduct by the Romans during the Roman Empire. This is around 600 BC to 8400. So this is during this time, engineers began to use sophisticated tools and thus built or developed more sophisticated machineries and buildings. Fourth is the production of paper and gunpowder by the Chinese around 180 to 1600 AD. Yes, the Chinese people during the Chinese empires are one of the pioneers, or even the pioneers in the production of paper and gunpowder. And during the first industrial revolution, around 1600 to 1800 AD, 1800 AD, engineers produces or invented the steam engine. Whereas by this steam engine, which provides multi-force or energy, so does the invention or the development of spinning and weaving machines. Sixth in the modern times is the manufacturing of mobiles or cars and household appliances. Yes, this is during around late 1800s to early 1900s, where people discovered like like Henry Ford discovered about the use of uh, assembly lines in the manufacturing cars. And not mentioned in this presentation is also digital revolution. With digital revolution includes the development of computers. So the development of computers dramatically increase the productivity of people. And also another is the invention of the internet. So coupled with the invention of during the digital revolution, coupled with the invention of the computers is the invention of the internet, which also exponentially increases the productivity of people. So it helped people a lot in terms of data, information, and communication. So these contributions indicate that engineers have become an indispensable segment of the world's professions. So it signifies our place in the world kung sa tagay ka-importante ng mga professions. Even as engineers are currently producing solutions to many of the difficulties faced by mankind, much is still needed from the engineers. So their outputs, or improvements, are very much needed in the following public concerns. So these are the concerns engineers are working to address. So these are the outputs now. Outputs engineers, these are the problems that they are trying to solve. One of these is the production of more food for a fast-growing world population, elimination of air and water pollution, solid waste disposal and material recycling, reduction of noise in various forms, increasing the supply for the increasing demand for energy, increasing the supply for mobility, uh, preventing and solving crimes, and meeting the increasing demand for communication facilities. So these are the areas of engineering functions. So we may have heard of, or based on experience, that you only have heard engineers assigned or working in the manufacturing, construction, or in the testing industry. But there are lots of areas that engineering function serves, such as research, design, development, testing, manufacturing, construction, sales, consulting, government, teaching, management. So to talk about the areas of the following areas. For example, in research, the engineers engage in the process of learning about nature, codifying this knowledge into usable theories. So there are research institutions that employs engineers. So these engineers uses their knowledge, especially if they take graduate studies. The knowledge they take from graduate schools is helpful in especially when they engage in the research. Second is the design and development. The engineering undertakes the activity of turning a product concept to a finished physical item. So uh, there are companies that focuses on design and development, but most technology companies or many companies have the division that focuses on design and development. So under these divisions or under the companies, we hire engineers so that they can turn a product concept or into a finished physical item by undergoing designs, optimization, testing, pilot testing, and other activities, so that they can turn this concept into a finished or marketable item. Testing, the, the engineer works in a unit where new products or parts are tested for workability. So after the development, so as I've mentioned in the design development, before the product is deployed is deployed for is deployed into the market, it undergoes several testing stages. So these testing divisions or testing companies, they hire engineers to work on this, so that they can optimize or improve the product before they are deployed into the market. Manufacturing. So this is one of the more common areas of engineering functions, the manufacturing, where the engineer is directly in charge in the production, charge of production personnel or in the production, and they assume responsibility for the product. Construction, yeah, construction is one of the most common industries where the engineers work. The construction engineer or civil engineer is either directly in charge of the construction personnel or may have responsibility for the quality of the construction process. So not only civil engineers are working in the construction industries, there are also electrical or mechanical engineers. But they also serve almost the same function, which is in charge in the quality of the construction process. Sales is one of the more common, especially for companies that sells or this product. They hire engineers so that because engineers offer several advantages if they engage in the sale of a product because they have the technical know-how or technical expertise about the product that they are trying to sell. So they assist the company's customers to meet their needs, especially those that require technical expertise. Consulting. Consulting is one of those functions that are engaged by engineers who have uh, sufficient experience or have this more advanced technical know-how or expertise, and they are hired or called upon as consultant of any individual or organization that requires services. Government Under government, the engineer may find employment performing any of the various tasks in regulating, monitoring, and controlling the activities of various institutions, either public or private. Yes, there are a lot of engineers that are working in the government. Teaching, yes, teaching is another areas where engineering functions. Uh, when they are employed or working in school or universities and they are assigned as a teacher of engineering courses. So some of them later become deans, vice presidents, or presidents. And lastly is the management. So where the engineer is assigned to manage groups of people performing specific tasks. Okay, so management, there are management companies, yeah. So they hire engineers that look upon, and these management companies are called upon to serve consultancy jobs to another companies. But these management positions are present to the other areas. For example, the teaching, consulting, government, and research. As engineers gain more experience, uh, technical expertise, or educational attainment, they may be promoted or promoted to higher position where the responsibility is to oversee or manage other people. So this management area is not only present in management companies but also the other areas. So there are classifications of an organization that involves engineering functions. So the classification is according to the degree of engineering jobs performed. Like for example, for level one, this level one organization involves minimal engineering jobs like retailing firms. So when we say with retailing firms, they are not focused more on the engineering functions. Level two, those with moderate degree of engineering jobs like transportation companies. So the main since the main vision or mission of transportation companies are to to serve people in the mobility engineering jobs. These companies are not really that are only moderate. Thus, they are assigned to be level 2 organizations. Level 3 organizations are with a high degree of engineering jobs like construction firms, construction firms, design and development firms. Yes. So since these companies require high degree of engineering functions, so thus they are called level 3 organizations. So this is the graph, the graph, so that we can see the type of organization and the management skills required of engineers. So we can see here that for level one organizations, we can see that uh, the management skill required for level one is for specialized, and it goes with level two. For level two organization with moderate engineering jobs, uh, they require specific management skill in order to serve the company. And for level three, with high level of engineering jobs, the mostly require general general type of management skills. Yes, why it is general, since the majority of the organization serves a high degree of engineering jobs. Thus, the manager that will be assigned there, the manager will be assigned there, encompasses all part of the organization. So let's talk about engineering management. So it is said that the engineering management is activity combining technical knowledge with the ability to organize and coordinate worker power, materials, machinery, and money. When the engineer is assigned to supervise the work of even a few people, he is already engaged in the first phase of engineering management. His main responsibility is to lead his group into producing a certain output consistent with the required specifications. The top position of an top position in engineering manager may hope to occupy is the general managership or the presidentship in a firm, large or small. So it is uh, the career path, one of the career paths that an engineer position seeks in an organization, yes, to become a general manager, vice president, or president of his organization. As he scales the management ladder, he finds that the higher he goes up, the less technical activities he performs, and the more management tasks he accepts. Yes, because for engineer that's for a starting engineer in an organization, the bulk or 100% of his time of his job involves technical activities. But when he is promoted uh, to higher level, to higher level, or if he assumes a management level, his technical activities will be reduced, where the bulk of his time will be used for management activities. Management may be defined uh, as the creative problem-solving process of planning, organizing, leading, and controlling an organization's resources to achieve its mission and objectives. Since the engineering manager is presumed to be technically competent in his specialization, one may now proceed to describe more thoroughly the remaining portion of his job, which is management, and hence the description or the definition of the management. The process of management, it consists planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. And to explain in a simple manner, management must seek to find out the objectives of the organization, think of ways on how to achieve them, decide on the ways to be adapted and the materials resources to be used, determine the human requirements of the total job, assign specific tasks to specific persons, motivate them, and provide means to make sure that the activities are in the right direction. Yes, thus, kanino, thus it involves planning. So it involves planning since the organization have laid out all the objectives. The engineering manager involves planning on how to achieve these specific goals or the objectives in total. So another is function serves the organizing. So it involves organizing the structure of the organization, organizing people. Next is the leading. So when we talk about leading, it involves motivating people to work harder. It involves so that by leading these people, the uh, the organization will achieve efficiently and effectively the goals and objectives. And controlling. So when we control the situation, it involves the situation and the resources available so that the organization will use these resources effectively and efficiently towards the achievement of the organization's goals. So what are the requirements for the engineering manager's job? Okay, for example, if you want, if you are now working as engineers, then you seek for a managerial position. According to Medina, these are the qualifications that an engineer must have in order to be qualified to become an engineer manager. So first is a bachelor's degree in engineering from a reputable school. In some cases, companies or organizations may need a master's degree in engineering or business management. Another requirement is a few years experience in a pure engineering job. Uh, and the third is the training and supervision. So there are also companies where uh, prior to getting the manager job, uh, these these candidates are required to undertake or undergo training in supervision. And lastly is the special training in engineering management. So some companies may require their people to or even send their engineers to undergo training or schooling, uh, specializing in engineering management. We get uh, we don't know the requirements for the the qualifications in order to become an engineer manager. But if you get into that position of an engineer manager, you might ask yourselves, how can I become a successful engineer manager? So according to Medina, there are three general preconditions for success as a manager. First is the ability, and this refers to the capacity of an engineer to achieve organizational objectives effectively and efficiently. It refers to ability or the managerial ability. Uh, Also has the quality of effectiveness. So according to Higgins, effectiveness refers to a description of whether objectives are accomplished Well, efficiency is the description of relative amount of resources used in obtaining effectiveness. So in order for engineers that can be said to have this ability, he must have this quality of to become effective and efficient. So, for example, this is that if a civil engineer was asked by superiors to finish a 100-kilometer road cementing project within 8 months, he said to be effective if he finished the job within the required period. On the other hand, his efficiency is measured by the inputs, other labor or materials he put into the project in relation to the actual output. For example, the 100-kilometer road. And if the same output is made with less inputs, with less materials and labor, that civil engineer is said to be efficient. Next precondition is the motivation to manage. Okay. There are a lot of people who have the desire to work and finish a specific task, but not many are motivated to manage other people. So that, so you can see a lot of people in an organization, in a company, or even in your class right now, that are effective or efficient in doing the jobs assigned to them. But not many people have the desire or motivated to manage other people, to or influence other people to do or work harder in the jobs that are assigned to them. According to John B. Miner, there are an individual's or an engineer's motivation to manage is anchored to the following dimensions. So there are, according to John B. Miner, there are uh, seven dimensions to which individuals anchor their motivation to manage. First is the favorable attitude towards those in positions of authority. So desire to engage in games of sports or sports competition with peers. So we'll discuss with the first dimension, the favorable attitude towards those in positions of authority. So if a person is motivated or have the desire to manage over other people, he or she must first have a favorable or positive attitude towards those in position of authority. Since he is seeking positions of authority, positions or position of authority. He must first be able to acknowledge or recognize people above him. Second is to desire to engage in games or sports position with peers. So this is in order to increase camaraderie. So people who have the desirable traits or the potential to become good managers or leaders are usually engaging with other people, for example, in activities such as games or sports competitions. Third is the desire to engage in occupational or work-related competition with peers. Okay, so this dimension is that uh, leadership qualities, or people with these traits often engage with people in work-related activities. They inspire or urge or motivate people to engage in work-related activities. If they inspire his colleagues or co-workers to engage in this type of training, professional development activities, the person is said to have the qualities of of a leader or a successful manager. Desire to assert oneself and take charge. Yes, desire to assert oneself. So a leader or a person with a leadership potential has to become has to be confident with oneself. He has to be secured. He has to be secured with his ability, with his total self, so that he can be confident. He can confident in taking charge of any responsibilities or jobs required to lead other people. Desire to exercise power and authority over others. Yes, so there are people that is when he's motivated to manage other people, he must be able to exercise power and authority. So one of these qualities, maybe there are people who are gifted with charisma, or this charm to lead other people just by their presence. So thus they can exercise power and authority over other people. Desire to behave in a distinctive way. So in this dimension, a leader should stand out from the crowd. So a person who stands out from the crowd has these abilities because ability to lead, because just by his ability, just by his innate ability, he has the uh, he has the presence just from standing out from the crowd, that he can lead because he is distinct and unique from other people. Seventh is the sense of responsibility in carrying out the routine duties associated with managerial work. So one of the uh, primary quality of a successful engineer is a sense of responsibility. So he must be accountable with all the success, with all the success and with all the success and even failures on the jobs that is assigned for him to oversee. And according to John D. Miner, high scores in the following dimensions are associated with high motivation to manage. And lastly is the opportunity. Okay, so a person, a person or an engineer may have those first preconditions, such as the ability. He may have this great or outstanding ability, and he has the fire desire to manage or lead other people. If he doesn't have the opportunity to pursue those other abilities, a manager cannot be successful. For example, if this person has this desire to manage, and he has this ability, expertise, experience, or educational attainment to lead other people, but he is not assigned a managerial job, then he will not be able be able to use his potential. Yes, so the point here is that uh, in consonance with this ability and the desire, there must be an opportunity for him. So one of these opportunities for a successful manager is that he must be able to obtain a suitable managerial job. First, he must be assigned in this particular position, in this particular managerial position. And two is he must find a supportive climate once in the managerial job. So one of the most influential factors of a successful management is that this manager should be surrounded by a supportive colleagues, supportive subordinates, and a supportive environment so that he can uh, he can use he can use the most of his potential in leading or managing other people. So to summarize this, the module one, engineers are known for their great contributions to the development. Thus, we have discussed the several developments, and those are only few of the tons of uh, development produced by engineers contributory to the progress of the mankind. There are many areas where their presence is necessary. Areas are necessary for the engineering functions like research, design development, testing, manufacturing, construction, sales, consulting, government, teaching, and management. Engineers may be found contributing their share of expertise in the various levels of organization. These organizations may be level 1, level 2, or level 3 that that are classified according to the degree of engineering jobs. Engineering activities need to be managed, and engineers are sometimes placed in positions where they have to learn management skills. Like, okay, so for it's one of the requirements for on how to become an engineering manager, because as there are companies that provide management trainings to their potential or candidate for an engineer manager position. Management is concerned with planning, organizing, leading, and controlling an organization resources to achieve its mission and objectives. There are certain qualities required of the engineer manager, such as aside from those qualifications, such as this particular degree, in training and supervision, there are also qualities. There are also qualities, and aside from those qualities, in order for an engineer to become a successful manager, uh, he is expected or he must have these preconditions of ability, the motivation to manage, uh, and the opportunity to manage or lead people must be met. Okay, so let's proceed with the second module. The second module talks about decision making. Okay, for an engineer to be effective, he must have the quality of decisiveness. What is decisiveness? Decisiveness is the ability to come up with a decision as soon as possible to address the problem as early as possible. Yeah. Yes. So since the companies uh, uh, time is of great great commodity. Thus the engineer or the manager that is assigned with with the decision making regarding all aspects in the organization, he must be decisive enough so that so that he may use the time and resources available, resources available for the benefit of the whole organization. Managers of all kinds and types, including the engineering manager, are primarily tasked to provide leadership in the quest for the attainment of the organization objectives. Yes, this is uh, accomplishment of the organization objectives is the primary task of a manager or an engineering manager. If he is to become effective, he must learn to become decisive and thus learning the intricacies of decision making. Many times you will be confronted with situations where you will have to choose from among various options. Whatever is choice, it will have effects, immediate or otherwise, in the operations of this organization. Thus, this decision making is very crucial to the success of a manager or a professional. A major blunder in decision making may be sufficient to cause the destruction of an organization. Yes, decision making, the a wrong decision may mar the reputation of a person or an organization, and it may cause the destruction of an organization. There are there are a lot of organizations that, due to poor decision making or poor decisions made by the management, it led to the disruption or the dissolution of the companies. Thus, uh, good decisions will provide the right environment for continuous growth and success of any organization or any organized effort. So, what is decision making? Okay, decision making may be defined as the process of identifying and choosing alternatives or alternative courses of action in a manner appropriate to the demands of the situation. This definition indicates that the engineer manager must adapt a certain procedure or processes designed to determine the best option available to solve certain problems. Decision making is a responsibility of the manager or the engineer manager. Also, decisions are made at various management levels, not only at the lower levels, or even you might imagine that the decision making is only a sole responsibility of the top management positions of organizations. But no, decisions are made at the either top, no, not either, but in the top, middle, and lower levels of management, and also at various management functions. Uh, for example, planning, organizing, directing, and controlling. Decision making, according to Nichols, is the heart of all management functions. Yes, just like what had been said in the previous slide, decision making is crucial to the success of a professional or an organization. But decision making is the heart of all management functions. There are steps in the decision making process. So according to Holt in his book Management, a rational decision making follows this eight process follows these 8 steps. First is to diagnose the problem. Second is to analyze the environment, articulate the problem or opportunity, and after that is and after articulating or identifying the problem or the opportunity, the manager must develop viable alternatives. And with those alternatives, he must evaluate each of the alternative, and after evaluating those alternatives, he must make a choice. And after making a choice, he must implement the decision gained from making the choice. And after that, and finally, is the evaluation and adaptation of the decision results. Let's talk about all these steps of a rational decision-making process. First, just like any other steps in solving, the engineer manager or the manager must diagnose or identify the problem. So diagnosing the problem is defined as the identification of the problem. The identification of the problem once the once they observe inefficiencies or problems as a whole in this organization. One expert said that the diagnosis of a problem is tantamount or equal to having the problem half solved. Yes, this is agreed. Because if we cannot define or we cannot diagnose or identify the problem, it is almost as equal as not solving the problem at all. But first, we'll define what is a problem. Okay. Accordingly, a problem exists when there is a difference between an actual situation and a desired situation. For example, if you want for your company to have 30% increase in sales, but after a quarter, the sales of your company only reach 10%, then this is a problem. Yeah. Another example of this is that, for example, the management of a construction company entered into a contract with another party or another firm for the construction of a 25-story building on a certain site. The actual situation of the firm is that it has not yet constructed the building. The desired situation is the finished 25-story building. In this case, the actual situation is different from the desired situation. Yes, because the desired situation is that the construction firm must have finished the 25-story building. But the actual situation is that it has not yet been constructed. So we can see the difference between the actual and the desired situation. That is, the 25-story building is not yet constructed. Therefore, the firm or the company has a problem, and that is the construction of the 25-story building. So did you see the difference of those actual and desired situation, right? Second, the third is to analyze and articulate the problem. So it is analyzing the environment is defined as the identification of constraints, which may be spelled as either internal or external limitations. Right. For an engineer to solve a particular problem and come up with a decision, the environment where the organization is situated must be analyzed, as it plays a very significant role in the success or failure of an organization. Okay, so it is therefore very important that there must be conducted an analysis of this environment. And these and in the identification of this and in the analyzing of the environment, the manager must be able to identify the constraints. So what are the constraints? What are the restrictions in this environment? So because environment can have constraints, either internal or external limitations. For example, for an internal limitation, so internal limitations may involve inside the organization itself. So sa mga internal limitations or the constraints, such as it may involve limited funds available for the purchase of equipment. So for example, if just like the example with the previous step, for example, if the problem was the company has to construct a 25-story building, one of the limitations after analyzing the environment is that the manager may found out that the company, that the firm has only limited funds available for the construction of the 25-story building. Yes, that is an internal limitation. Next is limited training on the part of the employees. For example, in building this particular type of building, it requires multidisciplinary people. Because it involves people who have knowledge or experience in the construction, in civil works, mechanical works, electrical works, and even in geotechnical works. And thus, if the if the manager found out that some of these employees are not having this adequate training for their particular discipline, this is considered as one of the limitation. Third is the ill-designed facilities. Yes, ill-designed facilities, it includes the building, the machinery or equipment used by the construction firm. For example, if the manager found out by analyzing the environment that the firm has several non-functional equipment, or the equipment are not well maintained, causing deterioration. Old equipment, and there are also equipment that are not properly organized. This is one of the particularly an internal limitation for a manager to solve a particular problem. There are also external limitations. For example, external limitations. So these external limitations are not innate in a particular organization. For example, for a design and development company, for example for Apple, for the Apple Incorporated, so this first limitation cited here is the patents are controlled by other organizations. For example, if Apple wants this particular feature in their phone. So, for example, if this facial recognition. So, for face recognition, for example, for iPhone 10, you want to add this facial recognition in their iPhone. If this and the patent or the intellectual property for facial recognition is owned by other company. For example, is owned by Samsung or Qualcomm, or other companies. Adding this particular feature to their product or the iPhone may incur additional cost. Why? Because the patents are controlled by other organizations. Thus, for example, for Samsung may seek cost from Apple if they are to use this facial recognition technology. Whereas if Apple owned the patents for this particular technology, it will not incur additional costs in adding this particular feature. So do you see the difference? Do you see the difference, or do you see what the limitations such as these patents, right? Second is a very limited market for the company's products and services exist. Okay. So for example, if a product wants to sell this, if a company wants to sell this particular product and they found out that there is a limit, there's just a limited market. Okay, so not this particular market. For example, for iPhone, Apple found out that not all consumers are willing to buy this kind of product because it may be too costly, too expensive. Thus, Apple must find a way in order to address these limitations. Okay, and next is the strict enforcement of local zoning regulations. Okay, one of the one of the restrictions, one of the more crucial limitations for companies are the uh, is the government. Okay, since the government is the enabling environment, and they have the regulations over these companies, thus providing constraints in these companies. For example, cited in this presentation is the local zoning regulation, such as in construction in the construction of a particular building. If the lot chosen by the client is not within a commercial zoning, is not in a commercial zone or a residential zone, uh, it may be a problem. It may be a problem in getting the permits, in getting the permits, particularly building permit, so that the company can commence in the construction. Yes, this is one of the constraints. Another is for uh, another uh, another limitations that is related with the third constraint is the taxes, tariffs. For example, as you mentioned with Apple, for example, uh, if Apple seeks to sell their products to China or in the Philippines, the local regulators overseas, for example, in Philippines or China, may impose higher tariffs or taxes in their particular products. It may dissuade the market in these particular regions or countries because because the added because the added tariffs or taxes will cause the product to be more expensive. Okay, so these are I've mentioned the internal and external limitations must be addressed upon analyzing the environment trying to solve a particular problem. So this is a figure. This is a figure about the internal and external environment in analyzing the environment by the manager. Okay. So internal environment includes organizational aspects, marketing aspects, personal aspects, production and financial aspects. So this is just internally. Internal factors, internal environment. So, in coming up with the decision, the manager must consider not only the internal constraints but also the external constraints. Yes, because they are crucial. Just like what I've mentioned about the three side examples of external constraints, they are crucial uh, for the success of the organization. Thus, in making a decision, the manager must consider not only the internal but also the external environment. Okay, so this all right. So for this, okay, for this external environment, these these are some of the examples of the external environment that must be considered by the management, such as the government, labor unions, suppliers. Okay, for example, for the suppliers, if the supply of your particular component of your product uh, has a problem with their logistics, for example, it incurs additional problem in your ongoing project, or in your ongoing development of your product. Banks, the financial aspects, banks, such because they provide the financial vehicle of the company, financial vehicle or the financial aspects of the company. For example, if the bank decides to increase the interest rate, it may incur additional cost. It may incur additional costs in your products or services. For example, for public, okay, this public, it involves the consumer or the other stakeholders in your company. For example, if your company, has this in the manufacture of a particular product, has a waste, has this particular waste, and it affects the environment of your of your immediate public, or the residents near your manufacturing company. The public may claim or put pressure on your company to increase the environmental awareness of your company and decrease the waste effluent from your manufacturing. Competitors, yes, this is one of the crucial external constraints in an engineering firm or any organization. The competitors, clients, yes, clients, because there are clients that demand this kind of product, this kind of improvements, uh, this kind of features. It also incurs additional problems, and has to be addressed by the management level under decision making, and also the engineers and the government. All right. Next is, after analyzing and articulating the problem, since the manager has already identified the problems and the possible constraints in solving the problem, he must develop viable alternatives. What are these alternatives? So what are these alternatives? Are the possible solutions to the problems. Okay. So oftentimes problems may be solved by any of the solutions offered. The best among the alternatives may be or must be chosen by the management. Okay. So you have identified the problem and you have articulated, then you have also identified and analyzed the environment, and after that you have identified the external and internal limitations. Okay. So after that, the manager must cannot craft possible solutions to the problem. So these possible solutions are called the alternatives, and he will list all these possible alternatives. Okay. So what are the steps in developing alternatives? Is the manager must prepare a list of alternative solutions. Okay. So he will list all the possible alternative solutions. He may get it from his subordinates, from his superiors, or other stakeholders from his company. But also, it may only be in the management level where they can craft or list possible alternatives. Two is to determine the viability of each solutions. Okay. The manager will look into each of the alternative. So, what we mean by viability is that if the particular alternatives are feasible, are they doable, or is this particular alternative can be done with this particular situation, regarding in consideration with the available resources, or can it be done with this uh, at this particular period. So after that, after determining the viability of each alternative, he will revise the list. He will revise the list. Okay. He will revise the list by striking out those which are not viable. So alternatives that are not doable can be done with this particular period, or too expensive to do, are not feasible. Just strike that out, and he will re-rank all those alternatives, and he will rank those alternatives, so that after that he will choose he will choose or evaluate further those alternatives. So one example is that an engineering firm has a problem of increasing its output by 30%. Okay, so in increasing this output, in addressing this problem, uh, addressing this problem, the manager list uh, five alternatives in addressing this problem. First is he will improve the capacity of the firm by hiring more workers and building additional facilities. He can solve this problem by securing the services of subcontractors. Three is to buy needed additional output from another firm. Also, he may this is stop serving some of the company's customers, or he can delay servicing. Okay. After looking into each of the alternative, the engineer revised the list by by striking out the last two alternatives, because the manager deems them to be non-viable. Thus, the manager came up with three final list of alternatives that he will further evaluate and choose into. The first three alternatives are found to be viable by the management. Next is to evaluate alternatives. Okay, so evaluation of the alternatives is that it involves proper evaluation that makes choosing uh, less difficult. Okay, so after determining the viability of the alternatives and the revision of the list of alternatives, uh, the manager will look and evaluate further each of the remaining alternatives. Okay, so he did a finalizing of the possible solutions, and thus evaluation is done. How the alternatives should be evaluated will depend on the nature of the problem, the objectives of the firm, the nature of alternatives presented, and according to Soder is that each alternative must be analyzed and evaluated in terms of its value, cost, and risk characteristics. Okay, so he will look into each of the alternatives, considering several factors. What are the factors? If this alternative are in line with the objectives of the firm, in line with the mission and vision of the organization, and if there are available resources in order to use this particular alternative, and also the values and cost, and if this alternative is too risky or not too risky to pursue. Okay. One example of this is that is when an engineer manager is faced with the problem of choosing between three applicants to fill up a lone vacancy for a junior engineer. So in order for him to come up with a decision, yes, he first identified the problem, then uh, he articulated the problem, he analyzed he may have analyzed the problem already, he may have analyzed the environment already, and so he did the listing of alternatives, and after that, he did the evaluation. So this is one of an example of an evaluation of the job applicants, the job applicants of a position of a junior engineer. Okay. After evaluating after evaluating all the alternatives, then it comes for the manager to make a choice. Okay? He must select among the alternatives that represents the potential solution to a problem. Right? Choice making refers to the process of selecting among alternatives that represents the potential solution of a problem. At this point, particular effort should be made to identify all significant consequences of its choice, right? Since although in the step of evaluating the alternatives, all the factors have been considered. If considered if we make a choice, if we make a choice out of this particular alternative, in making a choice, further consideration of the consequences in choosing this alternative um, must be made. To make the selection process easier, the alternatives can be ranked. Okay, the alternatives can be ranked from best to worst on the basis of some factors like benefit, cost, or risk. Okay, so one of the process of the ways in order to make the selection process easier is the ranking of the alternatives upon or after evaluation of the alternatives. Next, after making a choice out of the alternatives, is to carry out or implement the decision. Implement the decision is that uh, after decision has been made, yeah, after the decision has been made by making a choice out of those alternatives, implementation follows. This is necessary, for decision making will be an exercise in futility. Okay, so what is the use of making this decision if there is no implementation of carrying out of this particular decision? Implementation refers to the carrying out of the decision so that the objective sought will be achieved. And to make implementation effective, a plan must be devised. Okay? At this stage, uh, the resources must be made available. What are these resources? The resources can be the human resource available, financial resources, equipment resources must be made available so that the decision may be properly implemented. And those who will be involved in implementation must understand and accept the solution. Thus, the next step or the last step in the decision-making process is to evaluate and adapt decision results. Okay, since we have implemented the decision after making a choice or after making a decision, the next step is for the other members of the organization or the subordinates or the people in charge in implementing the decision must be able to evaluate and adapt the decision results. So in this step, the manager must use control and feedback mechanisms to ensure the results and also to provide information for future decisions. Okay, so at this step prior in the implementation of the decision, the results expected may or may not happen. Yes, there can be uncertainties to be anticipated in implementing decision because the solution, the desired result of doing this particular solution may or may not happen. It is therefore important manager to use the control and feedback mechanisms. Okay. So what is feedback? So feedback, you may have heard a lot about feedback. Feedback is a process which requires checking at this stage of the process to assure that alternatives generated, the criteria used in evaluation, and the solution selected for implementation are in keeping with the goals and objectives originally specified. So feedback is seeking of uh, it may be called as a validation or seeking of opinions uh, or looking into if what happened upon implementation of this particular decision. Uh, if the users are happy or satisfied with this particular solution, your subordinates or people under your division in your division are satisfied with this particular solution. You, you'll ask from them if if how was the implementation of the decision has been going. So this is feedback. Okay, control are actions made to ensure that activities performed match the desired activities or goals. So this so upon implementation of a decision, the manager must have control over the situation, must have control over the resources, and also over the people, so that in implementing the decision, it must be in line as much as possible with the desired activities, desired results, or goals uh, with this particular solution that is implemented. In the last stage of the decision-making process, the engineer will find out whether or not the desired result is achieved. Yes, and thus, if the desired result is achieved, one may assume. So the engineer may assume that the decision made was good, right? So after implementing after choosing or making a decision and implementing it, after seeking feedback, from numerous concerned division, or individuals, the manager may find out if the decision made was good. Okay, if it's not achieved, okay, the desired result was not achieved upon receiving feedback, further analysis must be made. Further analysis, okay, so okay, the manager will say, let's go back to the boardroom, decision room, let's go back to the whiteboard, uh, analyze what was wrong with our decision making, and thus so that in the future we can make better alternatives or better way of making decision out of these alternatives. So these are the process in a nutshell, or this is the general figure in the decision making process. Okay, so this first step is the diagnosis of the problem, analysis of the environment, and if you have analyzed the environment, you can articulate the problem. What are the opportunities that may arise after analyzing and diagnosing the problem? After that is you will develop viable alternatives. So in this step, the manager will list all the possible solutions, all the possible alternatives to solve this particular problem. Next is the manager will look into each of the alternative in consideration with several factors. Uh, it, several factors, and after evaluating all the alternatives, the manager will make a choice. Will make a choice out of those alternatives, and in this stage, in this step, the manager must consider all the consequences in making this particular choice. Yes, and after making a choice is the implementation of the decision. Since a decision has been made, it has to be it must be implemented. Otherwise, the decision made uh, is only a futile one without substance. Okay, so it has to be implemented. The manager may delegate the job to the concerned or responsible division or responsible individual implementing this particular decision, and after that, he will the management will evaluate the results. Okay, so he will how to evaluate the results. How to evaluate results? He will look into the he will look if the choice made out of these alternatives did did solve the problem, right? How can he do that? How can the management do that? It is done by means of the feedback and control mechanism. So feedback control mechanism here will ask the uh, he will ask opinions or opinions or validations from the concerned individuals or divisions uh, if the decision of the chosen alternative uh, did solve the particular problem or the desired results by the management was achieved. Okay, so upon receiving feedback, he will analyze the feedback. If feedback did have a positive result, and if it is positive result, then the management can decide if the decision was good. That is all for our lecture today, and this is a credit for to our reference textbook, Engine Management by Medina. I've shared to you the link to this book in the Google Drive. You can download or save a copy of the shared reference textbook. That Engine Management book will be our main reference in this subject. Okay, that's all for now. See you to our